When Nasty C released Free, he presented not just a collection of songs but a compact thesis on what freedom sounds like when a singular artist sheds external constraints and leans wholly into craft, personality, and landscape. This essay walks through each track as a discrete scene in that larger argument, reading transitions, production gestures, features, and lyrical detail the way a documentary film reads faces, locations, and archival footage, and it does so with the patient curiosity of a critic who wants to understand how small choices accumulate into a worldview. The album opens with an introduction that operates less as a placard and more as a stage cue, a short breath before the first full song, setting a tonal palette of low-register intimacy and careful reverb where Nasty's voice is treated as both narrator and protagonist. That opening moment is not wasted, it frames the album's recurring tension between vulnerability and bravado, between domestic scenes and ambition. The first full track arrives with precise economy, trading maximalist production for nimble drum programming and sparse melodic punctuation so that the cadence of the bars becomes the primary melodic instrument. Here Nasty C reminds the listener of his technical gifts, internal rhymes, micro shifts in vocal placement, pitch inflection used as punctuation, and the beat sits back to let the verbal architecture be read. The second track, the one with a prominent guest, uses the feature not as a headline but as a foil. The guest's texture and cadence create a dialectic with Nasty's worldview, pushing him to sharpen his own lines. The hook is built around a chant-like motif that functions like a communal stamp, its architecture for audience participation, and it gives the song an earworm quality that belies its lyrical density. Mid-album, a song that many listeners flag in reaction videos for its immediacy leans into melodic rap and small, memorable melodic motifs. The production is deceptively simple, a loop guitar or synth figure, a sunken sub-bass, percussion that feels deliberately humanized, and in that sparseness Nasty fills his verses with domestic images and interior reflections, making the track read like a short story rather than a playlist item. One of the standout moments is a track built around a surprising harmonic shift. The chord progression turns on a diminished step that jolts the ear and signals a lyrical pivot from exterior boasting to interior reckoning. Producers and engineers here use a subtle automation on the lead vocal to create a sense of proximity. At times the vocal swings into the foreground as if the listener has leaned in, and at others it pulls back, creating narrative breadth. Another cut leans toward the club and displays a trick often overlooked, the juxtaposition of anthemic, stadium-minded choruses against verses layered with careful, almost domestic micro-details. That tension, to make songs useful on both the dance floor and the dinner table, is a through line across the record. The midsection includes a duet where the featured vocalist flips the script, singing from a parallel viewpoint and thereby opening a scene rather than closing it. Their timbres contrast in register and texture, and the arrangement smartly carves negative space for each voice so neither competes for center stage. There's a song where Nasty opts for conversational flow, lines dropping like diary entries over a beat that emphasizes silence as much as sound, clicks, tiny reverberant snaps, and wide stereo pads that make the words feel like they're happening in a room, not on a stage. If you are enjoying this video up to this point, please like the video and subscribe to my channel, that helps me a lot, thank you. That intimacy is what makes this album land emotionally. Many tracks feel like eavesdropping on a creative being who is trying to reconcile fatherhood, competitive instincts, and the ethics of fame. Where earlier projects from him sometimes use features as star-studded punctuation, on Free features are collaborators of perspective. They either extend the story or complicate it, and they are chosen for timbral fit and narrative logic rather than headline value. Production-wise, the record consistently privileges low-end warmth and mid-range clarity, with occasional high-end glitter to mark moments of triumph. The mixing favors clean, roomy spaces around the vocal so textual detail, a passing name, a suburban image, the mention of a specific city, can be heard without battling the beat. A late album track reunites him with a longtime creative foil and reads like a reunion of two characters who have both changed. Their bars refer to a shared history while registering the asymmetry of present positions, and the hook lands as an elegy and a victory lap at once. Tempo choices through the album are deliberate. Faster cuts are used as accelerants in the narrative to conjure urban nights and the kinetic energy of touring life, while slower ones provide the listener with breathing room to enter deeper confessionals. Lyrically, Nasty inhabits a register that straddles the colloquial and the literary. He will drop a punchy slang-forward line and then follow it with a more sculpted, image-driven couplet that reframes the first line. That turn, from the conversational to the carefully wrought image, is a structural device here, and it creates a dual-speed listening experience where repeated plays reveal layers that the first listen simply gestures toward. Hooks feel designed to be widely memed and also plaintively honest. The best of them function like refrains in a poem, recurring with slight inflectional changes that make them accumulative rather than redundant. In terms of sequencing, the album resists obvious block structures. It isn't a two-act album with a clearly demarcated midpoint, but it does use juxtapositions, a triumphant single followed by a minimal beat and an inward verse, to unsettle expectations and maintain narrative elasticity. The penultimate track presses on generational themes, name-checking the past and predicting futures, and it is here that his cadences become conspiratorial, leaning in toward the mic as if sharing confidences. The production mirrors that intimacy by stripping away clefs and letting rhythmic interplay between hi-hats and vocal phrasing become the song's engine. The closer isn't a big production send-off but rather an exit cue. The last song ties motifs together, melodic phrases, a repeated lyric, and a production sting that echoed earlier, and places them in new contexts so that the listener leaves with a sense of thematic closure rather than finality. Throughout the album, vocal production choices are telling, doubled lines at moments of vulnerability, distant backing vocals to imply crowd memory, and dry close mic takes to simulate solitude. The record's collaborative credits, while generous, never disrupt the narrative voice, instead, they enrich it. Production choices by the credited producers show an attentiveness to space and texture, sparse piano touches, love-sounding guitar short phrases, and percussion that sometimes sounds simple but other times feels organic, as if recorded in a small room. These textures create a tactile impression of place. The album never feels like it was built in a vacuum. Reaction videos and breakdowns have honed in on the same details that make this record interesting, the chant-like hook that became a cultural marker, the way a guest verse reframes the protagonist's claims, and how specific lines have already been clipped into viral soundbites. Those breakdowns are useful not because they settle interpretation but because they perform the same cultural work the album wants, to translate private lines into public touchstones. Ultimately, Free reads like a decisive moment in Nasty C's arc. It's less about reinventing his sonic identity and more about consolidating the techniques he has spent a decade refining, then deploying them in service of narrative honesty. As a collection of individual tracks, its greatest strength is how each song functions as a micro-documentary, a short scene with its own mood, cast, and production language, and as a whole it becomes an extended portrait of an artist maturing under the pressure of public expectation and private responsibility. For listeners who come for hooks, there are immediate pleasures. For listeners who stay, there are slow-burn revelations in cadences, production choices, and lyric shifts that only reveal themselves through repeated, attentive listening.